Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information.
Hello and welcome to the Australian Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Kate Campbell, and today I have the wonderful financial educator, author of Money School, Lacey Filipich, onto the show. Lacy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kate. I'm delighted to be back.
Now, you haven't been on for a while, so I'm sure a lot has been changing in your world, but what's getting you most excited about the world of money at the moment?
Well, two things. The big one I think that affects anybody who's interested in financial education is it feels like there's this groundswell happening because financial education wasn't really a career path. Like even when I started my business 14 years ago, I had to explain what I meant. And it's really taking off. I think I attribute that a lot to the Money Awareness and Inclusion Awards, which are an international award, which started, I think this is their third year. And they're really making an effort to profile and build all the financial education work that's happening. So that's really fun. And then for me personally, I'm getting a job for the first time in 14 years. I'm joining a startup called Maslow, and I'm going to be building a money school inside their financial platform. So I'm really excited about that.
Now, if someone hasn't listened to our previous episode and doesn't know your journey from a very different industry to finance into financial education and someone that has reached financial independence fairly on in life, are you able to give us a bit of a Cliff Notes version?
Yeah, the very short version is I was an engineer and worked in mining. So yeah, very different. I had what I would like to call a quarter life crisis. I think I can still claim that at 26. And a bunch of things happened that was a pain in the butt for me and really brought my attention to the importance of time. And it was at that point that I was like, hey, I actually don't want to become a CEO of a mining company. I want to change. And so I took time off for a mini retirement, no deliverables. And at that point, my friends started asking, how come you can take time off from work, Lacy? We have credit cards and car loans, so we can't. And I was like, that sucks. Did you not get taught about money? And that was the first time I realized we didn't all get taught about money. And so I started Money School, and that was 14 years ago. And it's been an absolute blast.
I know a lot of people talk about financial independence, but we don't have many people on the podcast who have actually reached financial independence and what they've done next on their journey. So it is really interesting to read about your experiences. I know if people want to learn more about financial independence and mini retirements, you have a great TED Talk that kind of covers your whole journey on that. So one of the things I really wanted to talk about today is how money experiences throughout our life change our relationship with money. And you talk about this a lot in your book and you post a lot on LinkedIn about this stuff. Have there been any events, whether they're money or not, that have changed your approach and perspective to money and what it means to you in your life?
Yes, there certainly have been. And I talk about often the 5 Ds, right? So it's creative use of the 5th D, but I'll explain them. Death, divorce, disaster, disease, and redundancy. That's the creative one. Those tend to be very big turning points for people. And that's certainly what's happened in my life. It hasn't been the money associated with those events. It's been the time impact. So the two that were big for me, and I guess I should mention a trigger warning around this is, and it's related to suicide. My younger sister ended her own life when she was 24 and I was 26. So that was one of those things that really triggered me. And I went, wow, there's so much more to life and it's short still, I know my sister chose to leave. So that's kind of different. But that moment of like, wow, life is short really comes across. And the same when my mother was ill. So she had a relapse of lymphoma. I was able to close the business down effectively. I mean, it still sat there online. The book still got sold. There was lots of things that didn't involve my time, but I was able to say, I don't want to do anything for this 4 month and just care for my mother. So those kinds of things, it's not about the money, but the money has given me the freedom to make the choice, if you get what I mean. The money's kind of like the enabler. And this ability to say that, life is finite, it's precious, our time is precious, it's non-renewable. We'll never get it back once it's spent. So everything that's happened in my life has really brought that home to me. And I know for my husband, it's been having children that's done that. He completely reassessed his life and his priorities because he's realized that you never get these times back with your young kids. And we've got an 11 and an 8-year-old now. So we're hitting that period. We're starting to get the teen effect. when they prioritize their friends over their parents, right? At the moment, they still really like us. They want to spend time with us. So we prioritize that, so for example, we're going to be taking a mini retirement for 4 months to Europe this year with the kids, to get that quality time while they still like us. Those sorts of decisions, if there was a huge financial burden of them, we might not be free to make them. So that's what I think has happened for me. I really feel so grateful to pass Lacy, because it's not what I was aiming for. I didn't even have this goal of being financially independent as my goal. I just didn't want to waste my money, and I liked investing, and I saw the benefit of investing. It wasn't this idea of, hey, I'll be able to make these choices. It's just as I get older that I appreciate what it's been able to give me. So I think it's that hard thing when you have one of those events happen. If you haven't prepared financially, it's too late by then. The thing's happened. I'm really grateful that I've had that opportunity in advance.
It's often those big life events, whether it is a positive one or a less positive one, that force us to reassess our priorities and how we're using our resources. Do you think people can kind of get to that point without one of those events happening, where they go, okay, I actually want to think about how I'm using my money and my time?
I certainly do. And we see that in the financial independence community, right? You see it in your Rask community. We see it on, the Aussie Firebug group. There's so many people in there who they haven't had trauma. They haven't had a pivotal event. They've just hit this point where they're like, wow, imagine the benefit that there could be, the dangling carrot as opposed to the stick of all the scary things. That's how I think about it. So certainly people, I think, can do that. You don't have to have one of those events. And then I think, if I hadn't had those pivotal events that happened to me, I might not have gotten as excited about teaching people about money, because I've seen that as the enabler. So if you have had one of those events, silver lining out of it, but no, it's not essential.
Yeah, I do like thinking about money as something that gives you choices, because a lot of people look at money and think of it as something that's really bad, or something that's really great, or something that we should aspire to, or something that they're never going to have enough of. But if we just think of it as a tool that gives us more choices, whether it's choices in a tough situation or choices to go on a sabbatical in Europe for 6 months, I think that's a really good way to reframe it.
Exactly. Thinking of it as a resource to be used effectively to improve your life. That's how I think of money. And the more you have, the more options you have. That's what I think is the upside of having financial independence. The more you've got, the more that you can choose. Now, there is a downside to the number of choices if you get choice overwhelm. But I think that's a good problem to have.
Yes. As long as it doesn't stop you investing for years because you're still trying to pick a brokerage account, which is something we try and tackle on this podcast.
Oh my God, so true. Yeah, please, people, don't get the analysis paralysis stopping you from moving forward forever, because you miss a lot of opportunity that way.
If people aren't super familiar about the idea and concept behind financial independence, are you able to explain it in the way that you view it and what's worked for you?
Absolutely. And it's a really good point, because there are lots of definitions. Some people think of it as a security thing, like owning your own home. I like the technical definition, which I guess has been used more than 30 years, I think pretty much since Vicky Robin published Your Money or Your Life. And that is, you have enough assets to cover your living costs through income. So you keep the assets, they pay you. So for example, shares paying dividends, or property paying rent, or bonds paying coupons, and that income is enough to sustain your living costs. So it's kind of a mathematical definition, not surprising from an engineer, I guess. The thing that gets people very confused is they see this acronym FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early. And the RE bit gets a lot of people stuck. Everyone goes, well, I don't want to retire early. That sounds boring. And I wholeheartedly concur with them. It does sound boring. So I like to reframe it as, you get to financial independence and then you're time rich. You choose how you spend your time. Like, I work as much, if not more, as I did before I was financially independent, but I choose how I spend my time, and therefore it's much easier to feel fulfilled and satisfied.
It's interesting, that concept of time, because we often forget about it when we're working on our financial journey, and we can end up making a lot of sacrifices to get ourselves ahead financially, but we forget that our time is passing in the meantime. And how do you think about time when you're making decisions in your life? Does it factor more into the equation than money, or less?
More these days. I have that luxury, right? When you've hit you have this period of accumulation where you're trying to gather enough assets, and then this period where you've hit it and you're getting that income. Once you've hit the amount you need, you do have that freedom. You can make those choices. And yes, most of my choices now are based on, is this the best use of my time? And often, for example, I've got to get on a plane in a couple of weeks to go and meet up with the Maslow team. And I'll often ask myself, it might seem a bit morbid, if this plane crashed, would I feel like this was the best use of my time? Would I regret doing this? I know that's quite morbid, but it is a check that I do quite often. And it makes it easy for me to say no to things, because if I think, well, this is causing me to give up time with my kids or my family or not work on this project that I really care about, when money isn't driving it, when it's not this, you have to do it, you do focus on that return on investment of your time instead of the money. And even it does affect even my investing decisions now. I'll pick an investment based on how much time am I going to have to spend maintaining and looking after this thing.
Yeah, it's interesting when that shift starts to happen, because I think at the start of your career, your finance journey, you do have to say yes to a lot of things. You're often trading your time directly for money, and you might be having to put in a lot more of your time than you thought to get ahead. But it's suddenly at some point you start to have enough invested, you have enough career capital that you can start to put your time first and say no to things, which is a really great but privileged position to be in.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I feel very fortunate to have had that quite early. When I look back at some of the decisions I made when I was younger, they were very much focused on maximising income. And look, I still think that's a sensible thing to do when you're young and you're trying to build a career and build that asset base. But yeah, that transition, being able to recognise that you don't need as much anymore is just, it's hugely empowering. And I hope more people experience it so they can go and solve big problems that don't pay well. You know, that's what I'm worried about. The problems that need solving. But if you want to go work for that not-for-profit or volunteer, then you're giving up a lot. I really hope that financial independence means more people can work on those big problems.
Can you tell us about your shit to gold ratio?
Thank you for giving me authority to swear by reading the title. I'll try to keep it to just that particular word. So look, this is a quality of life gauge that I use regularly. And it actually has kind of mining origins, because, you know, when you dig stuff out of the ground, you've got the gold, literally sometimes it's nickel, sometimes it's lead, but it's bound up in a whole heap of shit, the dirt, right? Now, the theory is if you had no shit in your life, you wouldn't appreciate the gold, right? It makes it sweeter. A very easy life isn't terribly satisfying.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not, saying something controversial there. I feel like that's pretty well known.
I feel like if we were on holiday 24/7, we wouldn't appreciate it as much. Whereas
Exactly.
if we have a few holidays a year, we really look forward to them.
Exactly. So you have to have some stuff that you don't like, and it's impossible to clear out everything that sucks, all the shit, right? So what we want to do instead is maximize that shit to gold ratio. So you want to either add more gold if you're not really happy, or try and reduce the shit. Now, for me, that's things like I really hate cleaning. So I find it worthwhile to spend money on a cleaner. That is a piece of crap in my life that I was able to outsource. Look, I still do plenty of it. I've got kids. It's just that I don't do the toilets or the showers. That's the big thing for me. So, that's a small example, but this idea of trying to work out what it is in your life on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis that really does make you not enjoy life, and can you move that somewhere else? Can you outsource it? Can you reduce it somehow? Or trying to get more of that gold, that really satisfying stuff. And particularly, I see this a lot with people in their 40s, now that I'm in my 40s. They're missing a lot of the gold. A lot of the hobbies have fallen away, and they're pretty much family and work, and that's it. And there's not a lot for them. So often it's a case of adding in something that they used to love doing, whether it's a team sport or a creative outlet, to try and get more of that gold. But those little tweaks make that quality of life just so much better, and you can do that at any stage of your life.
I like the idea of it as a ratio, because it focuses you on the fact that you're not going to eliminate all of the shit, and there's always going to be some of it, but how can you change the scales so you have more of the good stuff in your life, and you don't forget about your hobbies as you progress in your career and you have more on your plate.
Exactly. Yeah, totally agree.
As you've reached financial independence and you've had a better ratio, like say you've had more gold than shit in your life, how has that changed the way you make decisions? You talked before about the idea of having more choices, but what are some of those things that when you're making decisions now, being financially independent and having more time and flexibility, how does that play in?
It means that I can use a different basis for most of the decisions. So take the trip to Europe, right? We've got a huge amount of savings compared to most people, so that's not an issue. My husband can quit his job or take time off. That's not an issue. So those issues that you would usually stop you from taking those big adventures, they change. And then it's more about Do we think it's safe? Is it the place we want to go? What about the kids not being in school? Those things become more important. So although they're still factors and it's not straightforward, I'm thinking less about my balance sheet, thinking less about my cash flow, thinking more about the experiences and the time opportunity, again, because I've got this preteen child. So that certainly has changed. When I first became financially independent was just when I was having my first child, and having that freedom to decide when I wanted to go back to work was huge. I didn't feel pressure to go back. Lots of people were like, oh, you'll be back within 6 months, Lacey, because you'll get bored. And I proved them all wrong by staying out for 18 months, but then I did get bored.
I can imagine you would have.
Yeah, it was a great 18 months. I loved it. But my mum was actually like, Lacey, you need to go back. I can see how bored you are. I was like, oh, am I? I thought I was happy. But that sort of stuff, it becomes much more about your motivation. So I think that changes significantly. You tap more into what gives you satisfaction and what's going to also, a lot of it is what's going to bring communal benefit in some ways. So I volunteer more now, for example. I volunteer at my kids' school. I volunteer on a board of a not-for-profit. And those sorts of freedoms that you get that aren't about your career, they're not about ticking a box. They're about giving back. That I really like as well, because that really improves your happiness and your satisfaction, I find. I feel like I'm doing something useful and I can help people who don't have the same advantages as me. So that's really nice. It sort of makes it feel like a village, like you're helping. So I think that's probably the biggest things for me. I do worry about my kids, though, seeing mum working from home and my husband was at home for 4 years and thinking that's what life's like. So I do wonder if there's downsides. So we're going to try and fix that. But for the moment, I think probably the upsides of having that availability for our kids has been really useful as well. They feel like they can always come to us and we're physically there and we've built really good bonds with them. So I hope that will help through teenage years as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the idea of kids learning about concepts of work and money through a completely digital world. I used to know that my mum flew somewhere to do some work and then she came back and the work had been done and because she traveled a lot, but I didn't actually see her doing the work so much because it was always you had to go somewhere. But now if you were just on your computer all the time, it'd be really hard to understand what your parents are actually doing.
Exactly, especially when it's in your house. And I like having it in my house because it means I can do the school pick up and drop off. I've resumed the primary carer duties since my husband went back to work last June. So it's had its advantages. But yeah, it is this, I have to, the difference between me sitting there scrolling on Instagram and me doing a Zoom or recording a podcast looks the same to my children. It's just whether my office door is open. So yeah, trying to communicate that life's not always like that is a bit of a challenge.
No, I do like the idea of, even if it's not financial independence, having some level of financial comfort going into big life things like having kids, because as someone that doesn't have kids but would probably like to in the future, it is something that I think about in the back of my mind, that will I have enough financial security that I can make choices and don't have to do X, Y, Z because of my finances? And I would like to make sure I'm in that position down the track.
Yeah, and I think that goal is enough to motivate people. We talked about whether you need to have that life-changing event. I think plenty of people find that motivating enough. And look, you might end up choosing exactly what you're doing now. It's just that it is a choice. It's not a must. And I think that's where that freedom, the satisfaction that comes from that's really compelling.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people in the financial independence community who have gotten close or reached FIRE. They say, well, I'm going to stay in the same job, but it's just knowing that I don't have to be there. I'm choosing to be there, that it completely reframes the way they're viewing it and their satisfaction levels at the exact same position.
Exactly. And it's just psychological, because when you feel like you've chosen it, you're empowered. When you feel like it's thrust upon you, you feel disempowered. And I really think that's important for humans these days. We get a lot of stuff that's controlled for us. we need to have some things we feel like we're in control.
And you wrote recently about the impact that financial stress has on us and how it changes the decisions we make, how we feel about money. And I've been thinking a lot about financial well-being and the impact it has on our broader life and what we do. How are you seeing that money decisions are impacted by our finances and our financial stress?
Mm-hmm. And look, that piece of research, I think, in my financial educator journey has probably been the most transformative piece of research I've seen. It really turned everything on my head. And I'm talking about the Princeton Poverty Brain Study that was done in 2013. So it's 11 years old, but still relevant. And it showed that when you're under financial stress, your IQ drops by 13 points. So you make worse choices in all aspects of your life, whether that's your health or your relationships or your job or your money. And so this stuff that I learned growing up in a typical, Australian liberal leaning household, that you don't give poor people money because they make bad choices, is actually the wrong way around. We all make worse decisions when we feel financially stressed. So what I'm noticing, we've got huge amounts of financial stress in this country. When you think about the impact of interest rates and mortgage stress, rental affordability, and that's a basic need. So something like a quarter of our country right now is either worried about not being able to pay the rent or worried about not being able to pay the mortgage. That is millions of people walking around with a script running in their head going, can I keep a roof over my head? And that means they're making worse choices everywhere through no fault of their own. It's just this environmental product. So I really worry about that because there's a very strong tendency sometimes, and there are particular educators who focus on this. It's 100% in your control. It's your responsibility. And if it's bad, it's your fault. That doesn't resonate for me. There's so much there that people can be doing the right, in quotes there, right thing, and still feel that stress. So that worries me. I'm seeing a lot of people that are more in debt, that need more referrals to financial counsellors, that are really struggling, that are using things like buy now, pay later to plug gaps, which they shouldn't be using. But it's not their fault. They've got no other option. So that, I think, is really worrying. So for me, again, that, when you think about the motivation, just the big stick of you'll be dumber if you're in financial stress can be enough for some people as well. So I think that is a really clear, measurable impact, and we're seeing it en masse at the moment. And when you think about how hard it is to get a reliable job, there was some fascinating research published on The Conversation this morning. They were talking about how it's 44% of people get a permanent job with the amount of hours they want within graduating, within 5 years of graduating. Only 44%. That's more than half can't get the hours they want from the career they spent a lot of time studying for. And that employment security has changed dramatically from when I was a student. So that really worries me as well. There's a whole heap of conflating, interacting effects that are causing people enormous amounts of stress, and it's not something we can say, hey, fix it yourself to. It's got to be policy. So that's where I guess I'm coming to more and more with the financial education is we need to change policy to put a floor under people's financial security so they can make good decisions in their life. And that's what I'd like to see more of.
And there's only so much each individual can do. And you're right, it is easy to focus more of our attention on what are some of the actions within our control, because it's kind of how can we fix policy from our own bedroom? But though there are a lot of issues that do need to be addressed and managed to give people more of that financial foundation so they can make decisions not from a position of financial stress and put themselves and their family in a better position longer term.
Exactly. And it's this hard tension there because you do have to play the hand you're dealt the best you can. There's no way around that. You do have to learn about money. You have to do what you can. You can't waste your money if you want to get ahead. It's just, that is a thing. But the situational stuff that you have no control of, you can't say to a person if they don't get there that it's their fault. That's the bit that I really struggle with. So how do you stay motivated? How do you keep moving forward when you know you've got something working against you? I think that's the really important personal psychological challenge a lot of us face.
Now, you've led me perfectly to a topic that I know you love to talk about, which is talking about money in schools, because a lot of us, when it comes to this conversation, or people will just use a lot of throwaway lines like, we should have learnt this in school, or why didn't I learn this in school when I was learning about Pythagoras' theorem and how to dissect a frog? I don't know if they do that anymore, but I did a dissection in my day. What do you say to the people that just go, well, we should learn it at school. It should be in the curriculum. That would solve all the problems.
So there's a few things I liked it because I've been looking at this for a while. You're right, Kate. I love talking about this. So look, pre-2011, it wasn't robustly in the curriculum. It has been for the last 13 years. So every student graduating today has had financial education from year 1 to year 10. And everyone focuses on the maths because there is some in financial maths, but actually most of the education happens in the humanities and social sciences stream under business and economics. So when people look at the maths ones, they're like, but there's only one a year and it's not very good. Yeah, because most of it's in HASS. You have to look at HASS as well. It's actually pretty thorough. It's 90% of what I'd want to teach a child before they reach 15. It's really good. The issue we've got is it's not consistently delivered. And look, there might be teachers listening to this. I'm yet to meet a teacher who chose the career because they love money, right? It's not their natural place where they feel comfortable. And then, so we've got that happening first of all. You've got it in the curriculum, but not consistently well delivered because teachers often report that they feel underprepared. On top of that, you've got this tendency for us to want to put more into the curriculum. The curriculum is chock-a-block. Most teachers will acknowledge there is no way you can teach what a kid is supposed to teach in a year. It's too full. So what are you going to take out if you want to put that in, right? Like personally, I want them teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, the basic stuff, those sorts of things, because I can't teach that as well as a teacher can. So that, I think, if we're going to keep shoving stuff in, what are you going to take out? Now, that Pythagoras theorem is a really interesting one. There's so much in school that you don't know whether you're going to use it later in life. I've used that theorem a lot as an engineer. And actually, the principles of being able to problem solve are really important. Not necessarily the, learning something by rote, but the problem solving is something they need to learn in school. So I think as long as we tend towards that more, if we use money as an example, then that's fine. But we can't keep shoving stuff in without taking stuff out, because teachers are leaving the profession in droves. Principals are leaving the profession in droves. It won't be long until we can't teach everybody. We are already over capacity in plenty of schools and unable to find qualified teachers to fill those. So we can't keep doing that. And on top of that, again, third point, I really think it's important that parents acknowledge that one of the best places to learn about money is at home, because you need to do it in little increments. You need to have chances to apply your knowledge. That's really important. So it can't just be theory. And so much of money is about values and ethics. Well, how much do you donate? What kind of investments do you consider ethical? Those are not easy things to run a test on in a school. Like you can't teach maths. Like maybe you can teach it in HASS, maybe you can teach it in ethics, but it is actually suited to being at home. So we have to accept that parents have some responsibility. And while we're trying to work out how to do it better, and we've got great programs like Talk Money by Extra Foundation, that's ECSTRA for those looking it up. They've got to over 200,000 students, but they only get to do like these one-off presentations. They don't get to come in and teach every week. It's not going to fix the problem. We need to fix it, but it's got to be parents and schools, and we've got to be pragmatic about what we can fit in.
And there's a lot about that problem-solving skill set, because at 15, I had no interest in really saving much apart from what I had immediately my eyes set on of, okay, I want that one item. And I wasn't interested in investing. I didn't have any money to invest. And it wasn't until I started my first job out of high school and started earning some money and experienced not saving any money for 6 months and going, okay, I've got nothing to show for the last 6 months, that I started to go, okay, I want to start saving now. And then I started figuring things out when it was relevant to me. So it's probably part of just making sure people have the ability to problem solve and find the answers to their problems as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And when I think about having done engineering, people go, well, you're sad you did engineering, instead of going into a finance thing or commerce or something like that. I'm like, no, the problem-solving methodology that I've learned in engineering has enabled me to do everything else. It's the reason that I prioritized saving and investing so young. Before I knew what financial independence meant, I was like, well, I don't want to waste my energy and my time. I better make the most of this money. That problem-solving mindset, so often we solve for the wrong problems, Kate. Like we solve a problem that isn't really the problem. We don't get to the root cause. And I think that ability to work out what that root cause is and then go from there, that critical reasoning, it's supposed to be one of the most critical skills that students are going to need, and giving them opportunities to apply that, to understand that. And look, money's a great one. I love entrepreneurial education. But yeah, if you don't come out with those skills, you're going to really struggle, because the moment something changes, how are you going to deal with it? The COVID comes along, what are you going to do? It's only when you've got problem-solving skills that you can apply them to novel situations. So I think that methodology is really critical.
Yeah, and I know you have a lot of thoughts on the concept of do your own research that everyone uses online, but there is so much information. So you have the resources available, but if you don't have some of those critical reasoning skills and you don't have at least a basic level foundation, it's very hard to work out what's relevant to you, what biases and what lenses people are putting on their content. Are they trying to sell you something? And is this even in line with your goals? And so there's a lot out there, but if you don't know how to sort of view it and see it within your own personal objectives, it's very hard to use all that.
I totally agree. It's overwhelming for people too, because no matter what you find, you'll find the equal and opposite somewhere else online. You can find someone to confirm your views or completely destroy them. And so that is hard to decipher. So being able to come back to those first principles is important. On that research point, I get up in my arms about the use of the word research. Now, you'll get this now because you're doing so much of your study, you're doing a my thesis, all these cool things. Research should be a protected term, I reckon. What we're mostly doing is reading, watching, absorbing, thinking. You could call it investigating, but it's not research. That point you made about bias is really important. When we read something online, everything has bias in it. Everything I do has bias in it. It's just how it is. And so if you're not a trained researcher and you're not good at working out what that bias is or how the findings have been applied, you haven't looked at the raw data and you haven't examined that, it's very hard to be accurate in your assessment. I think that's the thing. So look, in that interim, if you're not a researcher, read widely, read everything, listen to everything and try and, decide what you want to keep and what you don't, but try to hold your views. I talk about strong views held loosely. Be ready to change if it turns out you got it wrong, because you're going to get it wrong, inevitably. But reading widely means you've got the best chance of finding things that work for you and things that don't, and paying attention to things that might contradict what your beliefs are, because that's where you get most learning. Like that IQ study for me, it literally turned my, things that I had learned as a child on its head, had a transformative effect on me. If I hadn't seen that piece of research, I might still be telling people that it's their own fault if they've got a heap of debt and are making bad choices. Like, how embarrassing would that be for a financial educator? But, it would be easy if I hadn't looked out for that research and paid attention to what was coming out.
Yeah, it's a bit of a random tangent, but there is this amazing podcast called If Books Could Kill. I don't know if you've heard of Lacy.
It sounds amazing.
It's a lawyer and a journalist, and they pull apart some of the most popular self-help books from the last few decades that you often see at airports. And they will take something that just sounds okay at face value, but they'll look at the studies that have been referenced or drawn upon or the anecdotes and go, okay, this anecdote couldn't have been true because that author actually grew up here and not there. So they have made up this story or put a combination of stories, or they'll find the original research study and realize the completely wrong conclusion was drawn, or it was really cherry picked, or they've somehow combined 3 different papers together. And it's not finance per se, although they have reviewed a couple of finance books, but it just pushes you to go, okay, just because it says research shows this doesn't mean they've even used the research correctly or they've drawn a good conclusion from it.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. That's a lot of work, right? To go and find out all that information is a lot of work. So I understand why people prefer to take it at face value. Easier. And we were taught, I think we grew up in a time where trust was actually connected to authority in a lot of ways. Like if you had someone who was reliable, like take Paul Clitheroe, we accept that man knows what he's doing. And so we trust him, right? Like totally. But that's not the case with all the new stuff anymore. You should fact check almost everything. You should go out and verify it for yourself. And there's no downside for anybody in that except the time that it takes you and being able to use trusted sources. So I think, that sounds like an awesome podcast. I bet they pulled apart Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad on that, did they?
That's one of their most popular episodes.
I'm going to listen to that one. Honestly, it was such a transformative experience, like reading that book at 17. And now I just go back and go, oh my God, you are so gullible, Lacy. It still did shape a lot of my thinking about property investment, not in terms of, but one of those tips that he had in there, which was, go and visit the property at every time of day, do it 50 times before you buy, is brilliant advice. I still love that advice. It's really relevant, particularly because I had one bad experience when I didn't do that. Yeah. I'm like, yes, that was good advice, but there's so much in there that's crap. One of those things.
Yes. Well, that episode is particularly good. Now, if we've talked about some of the systemic issues, and there's a lot there, and that's a whole different podcast, and it's a problem that you're working on solving with Maslow. But if we think more about some of those individual actions we can take, because I know a lot of listeners love to try different things, to experiment, to learn, and to work on their finances. What are some of those impactful individual actions that we could try with our finances to put ourselves in a better position for tomorrow?
Yeah, I think, and this is onto that personal responsibility bit again, right? Play the hand that you've been dealt the best you can. So I think there's got to be a combination there of having priorities that you can work towards that might feel ambitious or possibly unachievable, but accepting that it's worth trying to work towards them anyway if it's not going to hurt anybody or disadvantage you majorly. So where this conversation comes up in the financial independence community is, I don't want to eat baked beans on toast for the rest of my life. I'm like, don't do that. That's fine. Okay, there's got to be a trade-off between having enough quality of life to keep you motivated now and accepting that life is finite. So yes, you do have to have some enjoyment, but you should still be trying to work towards those goals because you just never know when the economy or something in your life might swing in your favor, when there might be a boom, when there might be a huge swing up in the shares. And if you're not ready for it, if you haven't started already, it's too late to start at that point. Like when I think about the timing of me buying my first apartment at 19, I got in 3 months before the Brisbane property boom, purely by luck, not because I saw it coming. So it was a good choice, but it was made that much better because it accelerated so quickly. So I think you've got to accept that that can happen. So that trade-off is really important. But the one thing I want to leave people with is please don't beat yourself up, okay? It is not helpful for you to sit there and berate yourself over your latest spending statement or things that you have done badly. If it was for good reason or you had poor luck or it's a circumstance beyond your control, and I'm thinking about things like people who are in financial stress, I see it so often. They go, why did I make that decision? I would never have made that decision. I feel like an idiot. They think there's something wrong with them. It's not. Please do not berate yourself for that. It's a waste of time, okay? Do what you can to reduce the chances of it happening again and move on, because you sitting there getting angry at yourself doesn't serve any purpose. Just take the lesson and move on. I really think that's important. I hear so much regret and so many people who then label themselves away. Oh, well, I'm bad with money because I did this one stupid thing. Mate, it won't be as bad as some of the mistakes I've made. I guarantee it. I've made some incredibly foolish mistakes. So has pretty much everybody who's worked on money or tried to get to financial independence, because you will make mistakes. Don't waste time worrying about them. That's really important.
And giving ourselves the label, I'm bad with money, is really harmful to the way we approach financial decisions, because we keep repeating that script over in our head until we start really, truly believing it.
Exactly. And that connection between maths, this drives me nuts when people go, I'm bad at maths, so I must be bad at money. No. If you got through year 5, you're done. Like add, subtract, multiply, divide. We all have calculators now. There's no reason for you to think that you have to be bad with money if you didn't like maths, okay? You can do it, I promise.
The Money Spark compound interest calculator means you do not need to know the formula for compound interest anymore.
Yep.
Now, you have an amazing book, Money School, which is one of my favourite Australian finance books, and it's on my shelf somewhere behind me. I've got a few. But are there any other resources that you are recommending to people at the moment when people want to learn a bit more about money and personal finance and the way they make financial decisions?
So there is so much fantastic stuff out there. I recommend, again, like I said before, reading and absorbing widely. And you didn't pay me for this plug, but there's some fantastic Rask courses. So you can do some free courses online. There's heaps of those everywhere. You mentioned Money Smart, great tool. I love to follow people on LinkedIn because that's where I hang out. I'm really embarrassing. But whether it's Insta or whatever, you can go for it. So some of the people who I love to follow. So Wadzi Nenzu, she is a scam detection expert. She does great stuff, and so does Luke Raven on that area. So if you're worried about cyber scamming, losing money, follow their channels for tips. Mariam Mohammed is a really inspiring lady who founded Money Girl. I love her stuff. You can look at Ketvi Rup Narain, Simran Kaur, any of those ladies that are doing really cool stuff about financial education online. Follow their channels. Read what they write. They write for all sorts of outlets. Read as widely as you can. And like you, Kate, I've got a bookcase stacked with people behind me. And I do focus on trying to share female financial authors like yourself, Kate, because I think we need to get the message out that there's a whole variety of points of view. And I'm yet to read one of those books and go, gee, that was crap, and throw it in the bin. They're all good. They've all got different things, right, that they focus on. So please read as widely as you can. I did share a post recently on LinkedIn with a list of a few of mine, and people have kept adding to it. So if you want to try and find that post, you can. But honestly, even the back of your book, Kate, has got a great list of books that you can read if you want to go widely. Just keep reading widely. That's what I'd like everybody to do.
Yeah, don't stop at one book if it's not your cup of tea. Like, it might just be that person's perspective or approach or the way they're interacting with money, and everyone sees it so differently. So that's why it's great to, as you said, look at different perspectives, go to the library and get a stack of 5 books and just see what you connect with.
Exactly.
Well, Lacy, I will put the link so people can connect with you, especially on LinkedIn, in the show notes, and grab a copy of Money School, or maybe even listen to the audiobook. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kate. It's been delightful.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.